Okay, I thought I'd speak a little bit about starting a plan and then a little bit about walls. And people that I work with one-on-one using GoToMeeting and so forth, the first thing I generally tell them as advice is before you start a plan, especially if it's a remodeling job, there's certain things that you know about the job, or if it's even if it's a custom house, you know some things about the job. You know from talking to your client what they like and what they dislike, and the thing to do is to put those known items into your defaults. So go over here to File, New Plan, and I'm not going to get into templates. You can study the reference manual and practice with these and acquaint yourself with what these templates give you. I'm just going to use the default style because it's not what the tutorial is about. Okay, before I draw a wall, usually I know some things about what I'm going to do. So I go to Edit Default Settings first before there's anything on the screen drawn. If I'm going to be doing a kitchen or a bathroom, I'll set the defaults for cabinets, the three types of cabinets, and sometimes even soffits and shelves and partitions if I'm going to be working with that sort of thing. But certainly I would go to walls and set the kinds of walls. Like here in Texas, we don't use 2x6 walls very much, so I would set that to, probably what I'm going to use. We use a lot of stucco siding. I'll just use stucco. And so this is set up, and it puts the software working for me instead of I have to go back and change things because I set things up the way I need them. Let's look at the General tab here for under walls. And this is something you ought to read the reference manual about this, what this resize about means, because if you're designing a house and then the client says, no, I want to put 2x6 walls, and you're trying it with 2x4 walls, well, how are you going to do them? And what this setting here becomes very important. So you ought to study that and practice with it in a simple plan before you get into a complicated plan and don't know how to use this tool. I'm not going to go into great detail about that because it's in the reference manual, but I point it out in passing. You can set your foundation wall type. Okay, 8-inch. Of course, that's relatively common in terms of a thickness and so forth. Again, these are explained in the reference manual, and they warrant some practice with them. So you can create something and then look at it with the different camera types so you really understand what these settings mean and what they do. I recommend that to you quite highly. All right, now this video is prompted by a fellow. See, I got it right here. It's his #1 post, and a new fella, and he was talking about, I assume, I couldn't quite tell from what he posted exactly what the problem was, but I assume it's the way these walls connect together, and I thought I would go over that a little bit and show you some things that you can do about it. You don't have to just accept the first thing that happens. Software is just software, and it's programmed in a particular way, and part of learning it is figuring out how it's programmed to work, and if it doesn't suit your needs, and figure out ways to get around it. Okay, so I'm going to talk about main layers and stuff like that. I'm just going to draw a box here using a 2x4. I think I set it to a stucco wall. I got auto roofs on. Now I'm going to, you notice I did the first floor first. And some people new to the software think you ought to build a foundation first because that's what you do in the field. But in this software, you always draw the first floor, then the second, then the foundation. In a complicated house, I actually leave the roofs off until last, but that's just my own personal preference. But let's just keep this simple. I'm going to go to the build menu now, and floor, build new floor. I actually build foundation, yeah. And I want, I don't want to, here in Texas and throughout the South, a lot of foundations are monolithic slabs and so forth, but I think what gives people the most trouble is probably stem walls where you have a basement, and I think that's what the poster was talking about, is a basement. So we're going to build a basement. I never use this S marker thing. I'll leave it on so you can see what it's for if you don't know what it's for. But I usually uncheck it. And I'm just going to use the system defaults here and the footings are going to be 16-inch wide and 8 inches tall. That's the footings. That's fine. And 8-inch stem wall is common as dirt pretty much throughout the world. But a word about foundations are specified by local, state licensed structural engineers. I just sound like a broken record, but in the United States of America, all 50 states, it's the law. Even if you live out in the boondocks and you don't have to have an engineered foundation, you should. A local engineer is going to know your geology and your weather conditions, and it's his or her job to design a foundation that's going to hold your house up no matter what. So if you think you know best and you don't have to have an engineer and your house falls down, so you get what you deserve. Structural engineers aren't expensive. They're not slow like architects, and they don't boss you around except for structural matters. You give them a structural engineer a design, and he or she will design something as if their life depends upon it, because their life and reputation does. And so I just want to say that sermon one more time, and it's false economy if you try to build a custom home or a remodeling job without using a structural engineer. You're an idiot and you get what you deserve. Okay, now, so I set up my default for build foundation. We'll click OK. There's the foundation. And it's just, let me undo that. I'm going to hit Control Z because I was talking and preaching about it. Control Z. There we go. And Control Z. Okay. I went too far. I want to redo. There we go. Okay. I missed something here. Build floor, build foundation. It's this dialogue here. I guess I did go through it, and you set these things up, and if you don't understand what they mean, then again, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. Take the time to actually open the reference manual and find out what these settings are for, and are they germane to the 3D model? Are they just apply to a materials list? What's the significance of these things? I don't have time to go through all these input boxes, but they all add up to the end result. And if they're not set properly, you're not going to get the result that you want. So understand what these different dialogues are for, what they do. Take the time to find out, and don't just guess and gamble. Don't waste your time. Okay, now there's a foundation. Let's take a look at it with a dollhouse camera, and you can see it's just a crawl space, kind of a stem wall foundation. Now, I won't put in grade beams and so forth like that. This software is not a structural engineer, and so don't expect it to do that. It won't do that. That's something that you have to do. But believe me, just because you can draw grade beams doesn't make you a structural engineer. Okay. Now, oh yeah, okay. Now we're going to make this into a basement. Let's look at the whole overview thing of it. Yeah, there's the whole model that I've made so far. I haven't built framing, so there's no structural framing down here. There's a cavity for it. The software puts a cavity there for it. You can see there's some space there for framing, but there's no framing there because I haven't specified it. I haven't built it. So the cavity that's there is based upon, let me do a cross-section through here. That cavity is based upon system defaults. We'll go over here to Edit, Default Settings, Framing. Framing, where is it? Where'd it go? There it is. And we'll go to Foundation, Subfloor for Floor 1, Floor Structure. that's where that cavity comes from. It's coming from basically 2 by 12 eye joists that are 11 and 7/8 inches tall, and then 3/4 inch decking on top, OSB horizontal. So it created a cavity there, but I haven't ordered it built, so there's no framing. Now this, again, this isn't tutorial, isn't on framing. That's a whole other category and a set of tools and settings and so forth. I just wanted to show you that the software does, based on default settings, create cavities, which the framing commands, like roof framing, will fill this cavity up with framing based on default settings or based on the settings that you give it. Same thing for floor platforms. But this is about basement, so let's create a basement. Now that I've got a floor 0 here, floor 0, I'm going to go to default settings for this floor. Oh yeah, I didn't even know auto rebuild foundation is on. And you can see that this, like any other enclosed space, this has its own dialog box, or floor 0 defaults. And you can see the floor is minus 46 1/8 by default. They just picked an arbitrary figure. What is that? Floor C. Look over here in this diagram, and you can find C right there. So that little dashed line is a virtual floor. There's no actual floor. That's the reason the line is dashed. And it's minus 46 1/8 inches below the A of the first floor. In other words, the 0 of the first floor is a stable datum from which the software figures everything else. The second floor is figured from A, and the basement is figured from A. And these, this diagram here shows you graphically what these settings are actually saying. So if I want to have a floor in this thing, well, I got to tell it to have a floor, don't I? See, now those are not dashed lines; they're actual real solid lines. You see that change there? Okay. And I want the floor. Let's see, we'll set the ceiling height. Let's say we want an 8-foot basement. I'm going to set that to finished ceiling at 8 feet and then hit the tab key. You'll see that it drops the floor, and the graphic over here responds to that change. And then we'll click OK and done. And let's look at this in a dollhouse camera view. And you'll see we actually have an 8-foot stem walls here. Now, I don't see a floor here. Let me open that up. Okay. I didn't notice the floor in this room. We didn't get checked. Now we have a floor. There's a direct correlation between every setting and every outcome and effect. So if you get an effect that's unwanted, there's an unwanted or misinterpreted setting that you've made. Okay? It's always something that you did or failed to do or failed to understand. The software doesn't do things to you nefariously. It's just a machine. It's mechanical. You just can't stress that enough. Now, okay, we'll get to the guy's post. So here's the basement. Let's look at it with this kind of camera. And it's just basically a box. There's no framing, again, because I haven't built any. Let's open this dialog box and look at the ceiling. You can see the ceiling finish is set to 0, so there's no ceiling. I've seen people post about that. That mystified me for a while, but let's just think about it. A 0 thickness for a ceiling means no ceiling, pretty much. So let's uncheck that and click on Ceiling Finish. And let's see. I don't use Pro a whole lot. Not what I was expecting to see. Here we go, ceiling covering. We'll go over here. It's set to wood. I don't want wood. Put it to drywall. Man, how come it didn't change? I didn't hold my mouse right. That's weird. I'm setting it to drywall and it's not taken. Ceiling covering, plant material, drywall. I'm not quite sure why that's not working. Let's go to the Structure tab, Ceiling Finish. Trying to get a thickness there that I can actually on. See, the floor finish is set to 0 also. That's why we're just seeing concrete. A lot of guys that do basements wonder why they can't get a floor to stick. Well, if you don't assign a thickness, there's nothing that can be visible. So let's see. Now that I've assigned a thickness to it, I'm going to see if it'll take them. Oh, okay, see, the material change now took because I put a thickness to the ceiling, and now we ought to see drywall. Okay, bingo. Let's do the same thing to the floor. We'll open the dialog and floor covering. That's set to concrete, but go over to the Structure tab. There's and the floor structure is concrete, 4 inches of concrete, which you can change if you need to. But I'm going to uncheck that and put a thickness there. We'll just add 3/8. And I don't know if you notice it, but the ceiling, finished ceiling is going to change because as I add these thicknesses. The ceiling thickness gets subtracted from the rough ceiling, and the floor thickness gets subtracted from the rough, and you end up with a finished ceiling. The direct correlation. Let's go over here and change the floor covering to just something different from concrete. And we'll use that. That's fine. And so if you don't have a thickness set for the ceiling or the floor, well, you're not going to be able to assign materials to the floor. So I just thought I'd cover that because I've seen that question come up over and over with new people. Now, I can take this dialog box and just go to the walls and set, that's set to default, but let's put it on drywall. Also, I get a lot of questions from new people about materials. See, now there's drywall, but there's no actual thickness in the wall. It's just an arbitrary, you look at this wall, it hadn't changed thickness at all. I just told it to show drywall. It's not made of drywall. Let's open this wall here and look at it, go to the Materials tab, and it's set to concrete. But in the room dialog box, I told it to show drywall, and it does. And I forced it. It's not, you know. The better way to do this, I'm just going to click on the walls. I've got to select it. I'm going to click on Plan Material, set it to default. And the default for a concrete wall, of course, would be concrete, wouldn't it? We'll go back. Now it should look like, yeah, back to concrete. So understanding the difference between settings and applying layers, if you apply a layer of drywall on there, that'll show up in the materials list. But if I just apply the drywall here, it's just going to be an appearance. It's not going to show up in the materials list because I haven't assigned it a real actual thickness. So let's look at this. One thing is I can take this wall type and customize it. We'll just open this wall, go to Wall Types, click on Define, and there's an insert. And you can see here the wall exterior is the top of the drawing. So that's the wall exterior. Here's the interior. I'm going to click here so that this arrow is pointing at the inside and insert a new layer. And we'll call this new layer here like a 2x4 furring strips on edge. That'd be 1.5 inches. Whoops. 1.5 inches. And we'll assign the material. I'm going to click here to assign not insulation air gap, but framing. I think let's hit the F key. Yeah, fur framing. So now there's a furring strip, and we'll click here on this line and click Insert, and then click here and make this 1/2 inch. See, I'm building a custom wall basically. I'll hit the Tab key, and you'll see that change to 1/2 inch, and we'll change this to drywall. All right, then I click OK. Now I've changed this wall type named 8-inch concrete stem wall is now an 8-inch concrete stem wall with furring strips and there's the new layers that I put there. We'll take a camera view. You'll see this is a more proper way to do it. And it depends on how you're going to build. They make the software where you can arrive at solutions from different routes because there's lots of different ways that you can build something. Okay, now I'm going to take this wall and change it back to its default condition. We'll just click here on the sheetrock and delete it, and click here on the furring strips and delete it, and then click OK and OK. And now all four walls are back to the way they were. Look in here, and the sheetrock's gone and the furring strip's gone. Okay. So that's not the only way to do this. That's a way. Now let's look at another way that they've done. I'm going to take an interior wall. There's an interior wall. I think this is what the other fellow was doing. Now, to be realistic, this interior floor wall, if you're going to put a wall against a concrete wall, you're not going to have sheetrock. And then, see this wall here, let's look at it. You got sheetrock, and then first says 16-inch on center. If you make these custom walls and you don't take your actual building conventions into consideration in making one, then you get some goofy results. But like the outside layer, drywall, framing, and then we'll click on the outer side, and it's drywall. Now, for this kind of wall here, I don't need sheetrock on both sides, so I'm not going to use interior 4. I'm going to copy interior 4, and I'm going to change this to change the name from copy of interior 4 to interior 4 1SR. Doesn't matter what you name it, as long as it's not a different name from the default wall. And we'll get rid of the sheetrock on the interior side. And now we've got a 2x4 this way, and then on the outside side of it, drywall. And it's a different wall type. Okay, I may have goofed up on that. That's all right. Yeah, I got the drywall on the wrong side, but we'll just flip it over for now. Okay, so that the drywall's on the inside side. Now, let's take a look at this dialog box for this wall here. We'll go over to the Structure tab. And let's see. I assume this is just like Chief Premier. Maybe I shouldn't assume that. I'm looking for a setting to, it's not a rim choice. See, I should have practiced this before I started doing the video, but okay, it's a little bit different from Chief Premier. Anyway, I'm going to take this and drag it over against this wall here. And if you just drag it over against there, then it'll just bump into it. And so this could be a furred out, your concrete wall. This is applied by carpenters, and then the drywall on the inside. I'm going to hit the tab key to get this wall, and we'll, I'm going to, this little, I don't know if you know what that is. Let me go over here to Edit Preferences, and I've got it under Architectural. Right here, Show Same Wall Type Panels. That's how I can do that with this check, which is not checked by default, by the way. You have to actually decide to have it that way by putting a checkbox there. And then when you click on a wall, there's an extra handle out here, and you can extrude the same wall out of it, type out of it. I find it real handy. Anyway, I'm going to bump that over there. Butt it into these walls. I guess in earlier versions of this software, they had buttons that you had to push so that this would work, and then they've actually made the software a little bit smarter. Anyway, I'm going to finish the walls inside this basement. And we're going to talk a little bit. I don't know exactly how the guy who was posting did his. This is how I would commonly do it. And again, emphasize, it's not the only way to do this. I can make a custom wall type that includes this furring strip and add this color and add the sheetrock. That's how we did it in earlier versions. Nowadays, you can they've sophisticated the software where you can just do this. Now, if I was to drag this wall into the concrete, well, it will actually connect to it. Let me pull this away so you can see it. See, it's actually connected to it. If I don't want to connect it, I just pull it away. See, the guy was complaining about, well, it snapped. Well, so then fix it. If you don't want it to snap in a particular way, then fix it where it doesn't snap that way. And, you know, don't be such a victim. You know, the software is just a tool, and you just use the tool. And I realize that if you're not familiar with the software, you think it does things and that it's somehow superior to you because it's automatically doing things that you don't understand. Well, that's just an appearance. It's not true. It's up to you to learn how it actually works. Now, I think that's enough for today on this tutorial. Talked about foundations and creating basement rooms and different ways you can customize walls and so forth. And that's kind of what I wanted to accomplish. And I hope this tutorial is found useful by some people who need some help. But if there's any ongoing lesson to be learned here, is learn the software, practice with it, study it, and then practice with it so that you know how it works. I don't know how it's written, how it was created to do the things that it does, but I do know how to get things done with it, and that's by study and by practice. And that's something that anyone can do. Well, thank you for your kind attention, and good day.